Hello, I'm Christopher, a research software engineer from Research Software Workshops, and it's a very warm welcome to part 6 of Beginning R. So the materials at chriswoods.com/beginning R, and now we're looking at the dictionary section, which is here. Now dictionaries are another type of container, so we've already introduced you to lists, and lists will let you store lots of variables and access them according to their location in the list. However, there's sort of times where you want to store lots of variables, but access them using more complicated relationships. And one example where you want to do this would be to use a dictionary, where a dictionary will let you store variables and access them using keys. Now we create dictionaries in R by associating names or keys with elements in a list. So what we'll do is we'll close if.r, going to create a new R script here called dict.r, which we can grab here. Here we are. dict.r. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a dictionary which will associate some keys, which will be animals, with some values, which will be the noises that the animals make. Now we're going to call this dictionary sounds. Now we create the dictionary using C, just as we did using when we created a list. But now we set the key equals the value. So this is saying the key cat will be associated with the value meow. Dog will be associated with the value woof, and horse will be associated with the value neigh. So we've got three things within this dictionary: a value meow associated with the key cat, a value woof associated with the key dog, and the value neigh associated with the key horse. Now we can get the sound by using square brackets, so let's get the sound of a cat. So we look into sounds, we use the square bracket as we did before, but instead of putting in the index number of the item in the list, we now put in the key with which the value is associated. So what this will then do, if I now print this out so you can see how this works, so we're going to do R script dict.r. It's printed out cat is meow, and that's because we've said go into sounds our dictionary, find the value associated with the key cat, and assign that value to cat sound, which we've then printed out. Now, as I said, what we've done is we created the dictionary by adding names, which are the keys, and associating with the values, which are the items, the sounds of the animals in the list. So the three items are meow, woof, and neigh, and we've added names or keys using the syntax name equals value. So meow is given the name cat, woof is given the name dog, and neigh is given the name horse. Now the value is the real data that we want to keep hold of, and the name, and you noticed I've called it a key as well because we commonly call it a key in other programming languages, is how we access the actual value or the bit of data. We join or separate, join together the value with its name or the value with its key using this equal sign, and then we separate different values in the dictionary using commas. So there are three items here, three key equals value, key equals value, key equals value pairs. Now, since dictionaries can be quite large and typing all of this in can be quite difficult, when it sort of gets messy it'll be difficult to read, we can actually split this over multiple lines. And so typically what we'd actually do is break this up here and have one key value pair per line. It's not necessary, you don't have to do it, but it does make things a little bit easier to read. So you can see cat equals meow, dog equals woof, horse equals neigh quite cleanly in the script here. Now, unlike other languages, which will have lists and dictionaries as very separate sort of data types, notice here that in R, a dictionary is really just a list where we've named the individual elements. This does mean that we can access the actual items still by index. So here, if I print sounds 1, again, can I type correctly? There we are. We're still getting this first item, the value meow associated with the name cat, and you can see that in the printout here. Now, notice that it's giving us both the key, sort of the name, and the value. There are times where you would like to have just the value itself without having the name with it. And if that's the case, you can use the functions which are as numeric, which would change things to be a number, or as character, which would change things to a string. So in this case, if we just want the cat sound itself, we could say cat sound assigned from sounds cat, and then we can print as character cat sound, and when we print that, we get meow on its own. Equally, if I was looking up this value by number, so if I went here and I looked up sounds 1 and did the same thing, we would get the same output. So you see there are two ways which we can get meow, either by looking it up by its numeric index, 1, 2, 3, or we could look it up by looking for the name associated with the value, so sounds cat. Okay, so I've now walked you through this first section in this particular part of the course. We've now reached the exercise. So what I'd like you to do is create your own dict.r, and I would like you to ask for the sound of the dog and the sound of the horse. And then I'd like you to try and ask for something which does not exist in the dictionary, so maybe ask for a fish. Press pause, and when you come back, I will show you the answer. Okay, you've unpaused, so I assume you're now ready to have a look at the answer. So let's take a look here. So I've already got the sounds now in the script. So we're going to now try and get the dog sound and the horse sound. So let's now take dog sound, and we're going to grab that from sounds dog with that in square brackets. And take horse sound, which we'll take from sounds square bracket horse, and then we will print paste dog goes dog sound, and then print paste horse goes horse sound. And if we take a look at this, we should now see we get the right sounds coming out. So dog goes woof and horse goes neigh. But now let's try and edit our script to look for a key that doesn't exist. So let's now try and get the fish sound. So we say fish sound is taken from sounds fish. And then we can then print paste fish goes fish sound. If we now run this, what sound does a fish make? In R, the fish goes NA. Remember, that's because when something doesn't exist in R will return to us NA, which is not available. Now this can be a source of bugs, and so generally it's a good idea if we can find a way to see if a key is in a dictionary before we go and get it. Now we can do that by using in. So if I printed here, print, and then we say fish %in, and then names sounds, what we will now print is a true or false whether or not that particular key, in this case fish, is within the set of names of sounds. So we can see that's false. So we can turn this into an if statement. So we can say if fish in name sounds, print paste fish goes fish sound. And then we can say else print what sound does a fish make. Now if we run this, it will say what sound does a fish make, because fish does not exist within the dictionary. But if we now add fish, so we're going to put in the sound of a fish, you can disagree with me in the comments if this is not what you think the sound of a fish will make. So in this case I'm going to say fish's bubble. When we now run this, we say fish goes bubble, because now fish is in the set of names of the sounds dictionary. Okay, so that's now the answer to that exercise. Let's now move on and talk about how we're going to start adding data into the dictionaries. So I'm now down in this section in the notes. Now, just as with lists, dictionaries are dynamic. That means you can add entries to the dictionary and change entries in the dictionary whenever you wish. So if I go back to my sounds, I'm just going to delete these bits of code here and go back to the very simple dictionary that we started with. What I can do is I can add new animals dynamically by assigning. So I can say the sounds of a cow is assigned from moo. And if I now print sounds, so I'm going to print now the entire dictionary to the screen, what you'll now see is that cow moo has now been added to this dictionary. Now what we've actually done here is we've appended the value moo onto the end of sounds, and then we've associated it with the key cow. So this brings us now onto our next exercise. What I would like you to do now is edit your dict.r so that the dictionary is initially defined with only the cat and dog sounds, and I would like you to add the entry for horse and then cow dynamically. Again, press pause, and when you come back from pause, I'll show you the answer. Okay, you've now unpaused, so I assume you're now ready for the answer. So let's turn this back into a very simple dictionary where we don't have the horse included. So we just have two things initially, which is basically our cat is meow and dog is woof. So now we're going to dynamically add sounds horse is neigh, and then sounds cow is moo, and then when we print sounds, all four items are in the list and everything is okay. Now, in much the same way, I could actually change items in the dictionary. So say, for example, I don't like that the sound of a dog is woof, and I wish to change the sound of the dog to be bark, because I prefer bark as the sound of a dog. You can now see this will update it, and there we have the dog now goes bark. So again, dictionaries are very, very dynamic. You can change them at any point within your script. So now we're moving down the page, and we're now looking at looping over dictionaries. Now when we were discussing for loops, you were told that R allows you to loop over lots of different types of data, such as lists and sequences. Now since the dictionary is just a list with names, where each item has a name or a key associated with it, it means we can loop over the dictionaries too. So to discover how it works, let's now do the naive thing first and just see what happens when we loop over the dictionary. So I'm going to put the horse back in here. Going to remove the code below, and now we're just going to naively kind of loop over the dictionary. So I'm going to say for thing in sounds, because we don't know what this thing is yet, so let's just print it and have a look. What is this going to give us? Let's have a see. You can see now it's printed meow, woof, neigh. Now this is hopefully what you should expect, because meow, woof, neigh are the values in the dictionary. So it seems that when we loop over the dictionary, we will be given the values. And this, of course, does make sense. The dictionary is just a list with named values. So what if we wanted to loop now over the names, so over the keys instead? Well, there is this function called names, and names will give you a list of the names in the dictionary. So if I loop over thing in names sound, this will now give me cat, dog, horse, because cat, dog and horse are the names associated with the values in the list. Now if we want to loop over the dictionary and get both the key and the value of each item, as I said, we can remember that the dictionary is just a list. And so because we can loop over the items in a list by index, we can then look up the value of them by index. So what I can do here, if I get rid of this, I can say for I in sequence, because we're going to generate a sequence of numbers from 1 to the number of items in sounds. Remember that length is the number of items in a list, equally the number of items in a dictionary, because they're the same thing. We'll get the value, which will be the sound, which we'll get as sounds I. And then we can then get the name of the sound, and we can do that by basically saying animal is names sound. And then we can say print paste animal goes sound. Now if we run this, you can see cat goes meow, dog goes woof, horse goes neigh. We've managed to get the key and the value from the dictionary in a loop. So with that, I've now taken you down to the end of this page, and we now have the final exercise. So with this final exercise, what I'd like you to do is make a dictionary with the keys being the names of countries and the values being the country's capital cities. Loop over the dictionary and print something like the capital of France is Paris for each item, so the capital of the UK is London, etc. Press pause, and when you come back I will show you the answer. Okay, you've now unpaused, so I'm going to assume you now wish to see the answer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create the list or the dictionary of capital cities and countries. So let's call this something sensible. So we're going to call it capitals. I'm going to create this over multiple lines, and because we're going to be looking up the capital, which is the value, from the key, which is the country, we put the keys, the countries, on the left. So the capital of France is Paris. Then the capital of the United Kingdom is London, if I can type. Then we have the capital of the USA is Washington, D.C. Then we have the capital of Kenya, which is Nairobi. Okay, now to loop over them all, remember we're going to loop now using the sequence. So we're going to go for I in sequence 1 to the length of capitals. And make sure I get the right number of brackets. You notice here RStudio is highlighting when I've got the brackets so we can see when I've got this right. There we are. And we're going to say the capital is going to be the value at this index, so capitals I. The country is going to be the key or the name for this particular value, so we do names capital. And then we can then print, paste the capital of country is capital. And now if we run this script, hopefully this should now work, and you can see the capital of France is Paris, capital of United Kingdom is London, capital of USA is Washington, capital of Kenya is Nairobi. And with that, we've now completed that exercise. This means we've now finished this page, and we're now finished part 6, so then part 7 will be next, and I look forward to seeing you there.